But the Prophet ﷺ did not say, what is this anxiety thing? That's not real. No, it's a real and bona fide issue. There's a narration in which, in the Sunan of Abu Dawood, that we learned that the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ one time entered his masjid in the middle of the day, in the daytime. And he found one of the men from the Ansar, and his name was Abu Umama. And he says to him, "O Abu Umama, why is it that I find you in my masjid in a time other than a prayer time?" Think about it. People go to the masjid to pray, their 5 daily prayers. And in between prayers, they go back to their work, their family, they deal with other things in life. But here was this man from a Sahabi who was sitting in the masjid at the time in between the prayer times. So it was a little different. Not only that, but the narration says that he looked overwhelmed. In fact, they describe the way he was sitting as he was sitting with his cheek in his hand like this, kind of very overwhelmed. And this is why the Prophet ﷺ asks him this question, why do I find you sitting in my masjid, right, and other than the prayer time? And Abu Umama responds and he says, Ya Rasulullah, worries afflict me. Worries, I'm worried, I'm overthinking, worries afflict me. And I have debts, Ya Rasulullah. And this is when the Prophet ﷺ says to him, shall I teach you some words that if you were to say them, Allah will remove your worries and help you repay your debt? And of course, Abu Umama says, yes, Ya Rasulullah, please teach me these words. And this is where we get something very powerful and very strong. And I want you, I hope, inshallah, if you don't already have this memorized, some of you may or may recite it anyway already. You may recognize it when I say it. But if you don't, please take this down, memorize this as one of the things you commit to memory. The Prophet ﷺ says to Abu Umama, in the morning and in the evening, I want you to say these words. And he teaches him, and I'm going to say the Arabic, then translate them into English. He says to him, say, Allahumma inni a'udhu bika min al-hammi wal-hazan wal-ajzi wal-kasal wal-jubni wal-bukhl wa-dala' ad-dayni wa ghalabat ar-rijal. I'll translate. He says to him, say in the morning or the evening, O Allah, I seek refuge in you from worries and grief. I seek refuge in you from incapacity and laziness. I seek refuge in you from cowardliness and stinginess. And I seek refuge in you from being overwhelmed by debt and being overwhelmed by others. And Abu Umama then says, in the rest of the narration, he says he continued to recite this dua, these words. He said, I did that until Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala took away my worries and helped me repay my debts. And I share this story because then it becomes something that is directly part of the tools that the Prophet ﷺ teaches us when you feel overwhelmed and overthinking, the way Abu Umama was sitting there with his cheek in his hand in the masjid, overwhelmed, just overthinking, thinking. And because he was so heavily in debt, he was so worried. And the Prophet ﷺ teaches us several things here. This narration becomes part of the prophetic sayings or da'iyah, the du'as that are recited in the evening and the night. We call them adhkar al-sabahi wal-masa, right? The dhikr that you say in the morning and night. And we learn a couple more things. The way the Prophet ﷺ dealt with someone who was anxious. Notice, he didn't chastise him. He didn't shame him. He didn't guilt him. He didn't say, bad on you, you should have more faith in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. If your iman was stronger, you wouldn't be sitting here worried like this. Who, a mu'min, a good believer doesn't worry. No such thing. No such rhetoric, no such language. Instead, the Prophet ﷺ empathized, came to his level, talked to him, and made sure that he had a tool, a technique, something he gave him, something to help him with this situation. And this not only becomes something Abu Umama does, but it becomes now part of the sunnah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and that he himself, the Prophet himself sallallahu alaihi wasallam, continues to read it as part of his own adhkar right? Dhikr that he does daily, that he teaches us, you and I, to do daily. This is important because it also means a third thing, that the Prophet ﷺ did not say, what is this anxiety thing? That's not real. No, it's a real and bona fide issue. And the Prophet ﷺ, who is the best of people and has the best of iman, best of faith, why would he every day in his own worship recite, "Oh Allah, lift from me anxiety and grief or sadness," if these were not real human conditions? So when people come to talk to me about mental health and they say, where in the Quran and the Sunnah, I say, right here, right here. It's really clear, subhanAllah. And sometimes we know these stories, but we haven't, or we know this dhikr, but we don't know the backstory of how it came to be. And connecting the dots is so powerful. So back to what we were saying here, this is a prophetic tool, something that this sunnah of ours, it inspires us to take action.